In this video, we're going to show you how you can transfer or migrate over your Universal Analytics events to the new data model of Google Analytics 4, which has only events. So how do you do this? All and more coming up. Hi there, Measure Geeks. Julian here, back with another video. And today we want to talk about Universal Analytics events and how to migrate them over to Google Analytics 4. And for that, I have a little bit of a demo plan here. So what we are trying to do is really to take our events that you might be sending in. I'm doing this via Google Tag Manager and transferring them over to Google Analytics 4. Now, you might know that Google Analytics 4 has a completely new data model. Whereas in Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, we had the ability to send over different hits, so to say. So we were able to send over page views, social hits, event hits. Now in Google Analytics 4, we only have the ability to send in events. And this is the new event data model. Now this event data model is very flexible, but at the same time, you should be paying attention to some of the nuances of sending data into this new data model, because it's not so easy to just take your old events from Universal Analytics and just port them over or upgrade them as some might think it would be. Let's take a look at how you would integrate Google Analytics Universal Analytics events. These are normally done through a setup just like this. So you send in an event, and then you have a category, action, and a label that you would send over. You can name these whatever you want, form submit, and then I'm sending in the form ID, for example, and the label would be page path. And that is information that I would then see in my event reports in Universal Analytics. Now, inside of a new Google Analytics 4 tag, if I would go over here to new and create a GA4 event, then I choose my configuration tag, which I've already set up. Then I just give it an event name. And you might be thinking, well, the event name here, isn't that just what we had previously, form submit? Okay, now I switched over because I had the wrong here. So when I just write in here form submit, so I'd be able to port them over. And then where are my category, action, label? Well, this is what you would put in as event parameters. And if you're not yet used to Google Analytics 4, you might be thinking, well, the parameter name here might be category. And then we have action and we have label. And then we just fill out our values according to our schema than before. But you are missing out on a huge part of Google Analytics 4, because the new data model gives us more flexibility to use these parameters. At the same time, we have limitations in this new data model that you should pay attention to. And you don't want to really force Google Analytics 4 to use an old data model that maybe in the future might not hold up to your needs. So therefore, I would say that you actually think about, before you implement, how to do this and think this actually through. Again, Google Analytics 4 has a parameter or event name, and then it has event parameters that you can send in, which are kind of like properties or descriptors of that event. So they describe the event even further. And what you can then do is in each event parameter, you have a parameter name and a parameter value. So key pair values, so to say. Or key value pairs, so you can be able to find these later on as well. And if you are stretching them across other events, be able to compare or filter based on certain criteria that that event has. Now, taking just the event parameter name and saying it should be category, action, and label is something that is the old data model of Google Analytics. So the new Google Analytics data model should actually be based on what Google Analytics 4 is best at, which are these flexible naming conventions. So how do you now port this actually over to Google Analytics 4? I would actually delete this here or discard this and look at my event closely up again. I don't know, why is there no trigger? The trigger should be attached. Okay. So we have an event, and this is an event. We are already sending over the page view. We have named it category form submit, then action, and then label. And we are sending certain information in. But this, again, is not something that we want to use in the future. We want to now port this over to Google Analytics 4. Now, the first thing that you should be looking at is actually if the event name is something that Google Analytics 4 picks up automatically already. You might know that the Google Analytics 4 tracking code has certain facilities to send information into the system automatically. So when we go here to data streams, and we have here our data stream, we have something called enhanced measurement. And here we can tell the Google Analytics tracking code, Google Analytics 4 tracking code, to automatically measure interactions and content on your site. And these interactions are way more than what Google Analytics could do by default previously. So we have page views, we have scrolls, outbound link clicks, site search, video engagement, and file downloads. So each time you look at your event and say, well, is this actually automatically tracked? Maybe I don't have to actually migrate it over and put it into my system manually. Maybe this data is already been tracked. So if you have been tracking outbound link clicks in your old universal analytics, you might not need to be doing this anymore because the enhanced measurement gives you the ability to do this automatically. And it may already be by default enabled here, right? So we also have site search, video engagement, and file downloads. So take a look at these and tell me, do you see form submit? Not really. So that might be an event that we need to manually build in and actually migrate over. So the next step would actually then be to look at the recommended events from Google Analytics. Now, recommended events are events, although Google Analytics 4 doesn't tell us what to do inside of our event setup, we can be as flexible as possible or as we like. We should adhere to some standards because then Google Analytics 4 can interpret our data better. You know that there might be, or there will be in future much machine learning going on. So they have a certain standard of how they want us to send events in, although we can be completely flexible. So the next step would actually be, if it's not under the enhanced measurement events, to go over to the documentation. And here we have an event reference for Google Analytics 4. And on the right side here, we see all the different events that we have as a recommendation. Actually, there's another, so we have enhanced measurement events here. These are the enhanced measurements events that are automatically connected by the tracking code, at least on the website. And then we have recommended events right here. And this is also exactly the same right here. So for all properties, they have these categories, all properties, online sales, and then games. So if we have, for example, a form submit, which category or which recommended event could this fit into? So we have ad impressions, earn virtual currency, something maybe for a gaming company, join group, login, purchase, refund. We have the e-commerce events, obviously. And then we also have other events like sign up or tutorial begin, right? But we don't really see the form submit. Now, at that stage, I would say, okay, if it's not really a sign up form because it's a contact us form, and in the end, which we want to track here, it's not really a login form, although this could also be a form. So it's not really a recommended event that we have here. In that instance, I would say, well, okay, it would make sense to now port over our form submit from Google Analytics, Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4, and maybe use that name form submit. But again, here, something to pay attention to is the naming convention that Google Analytics 4 already gives us, like kind of, by naming their recommended events that way. So they are all small letters here. If you want to separate them, there's an underscore. This is maybe something you need to make note of. And then when you have, for example, certain events, like let's go with login, for example. You have, recommended parameters as well, like the method here, right? So what method did they use to log in? That wouldn't be something that I would have in my contact us form, but it gives us a hint of what data Google Analytics 4 might be able to interpret. And actually, you have certain limitations on the event parameters that you can put in. So there are restrictions on the custom dimensions or custom parameters that you can put in. So that's why I would rather reuse something that Google Analytics 4 is already using. It will be able to interpret it better. And then in the end, we will also not hit our limits as fast because they don't count towards the limits. So we can scroll through here and see, for example, if we have an event that might be what we are looking for. So for example, the sign up event, we also have just method in here. So not really something that we might want to use, but if you see something, if you want to send in anything like an item name, for example, you might want to reuse this later on. Achievement ID we have here. So these are the parameters. You should also have always a look at the parameters if you can reuse any of these, like item brand. These are the e-commerce parameters, for example. Now, in my case, I wouldn't say that when I say the form ID is obviously like the form type maybe, or the form name, or the form ID. If we want to use it as a key, we can do so and put this in as a custom parameter. This would be then counted towards our limits as well. Now we have here also something called page path, which actually in Universal Analytics didn't make much sense, but then also in GA4 it doesn't make much sense, because with each event we are already sending the page location over. So when we go back here and look at the automatically collected events, we should have the we add clicks. We should have the page view actually. So here's the page view, and the page location is sent with in each event. So we don't really need this as the as a third parameter. You don't have to fill out all the parameters and port them over, right? In this instance, I would actually say, well, let's get rid of the page path in our Google Analytics 4 implementation and just have one parameter, which is the form ID. And then we call this form submit. So we are also, if we have other forms on our page, more variable that we'll be able to utilize other form IDs if we have them on our side. So we can be more flexible in that regard. So how would we port this over? I would just go in and, well, I need to save this. And then create a new Google Analytics 4 tag. No, not a configuration tag I have already created. So I'm going to go with the event tag. And this is my configuration tag. So Google Analytics knows, or Google Tag Manager knows where to send that data to. And then we enter the event name. Again, we want to adhere to the naming convention of Google Analytics 4, so everything small, and then form submit, for example, or just form. You could call it this way. I wouldn't call it, for example, contact us form, because we may have other forms that we want to track. And then we can go ahead, if we want to differentiate our forms, and put in form ID, for example, as our parameter, and then we'll fill our parameter with the form ID just like we had it before. Now you could put in page here, but the page location is automatically tracked, so that's why I would leave it out. And then you attach the right trigger here, all right? And we have a Google Analytics 4 event for our form submit. Do you still need the event key here? Not really, because everything is an event, but this would probably, may be like, okay, this is an interaction that the user does. So I will, this is just what I do. Okay, we have this now configured, and then you need to obviously preview this. So we go to the page and we fill out our data and submit it. And then in our tag assistant, we should have seen a form submit right here. And we are seeing our Google Analytics 4 form submit and our event form submit. Let's go over to Google Analytics 4 first and look into our debug view. Let's see if you can see anything. Yes, here we have our new form submit with a form ID that is GForm5. Right? And that should be modeled after our events here that we are sending into Google Analytics Universal. Here we have the event category form submit, event action G form 5. And then we would also have the page path. I think that would be, if we click in here, nope. Here we see the event label is contact us, which we already in Google Analytics 4 have in the page location. So this kind of is sending over automatically there as well. So these are the steps that I would go through if you want to model your data over. Now, if you have more events, then it gets more complicated, because I would really think through how you would like to have these events modeled in the new data model. So if you have multiple forms that you want to track, then you might want to have the form ID as the differentiator and as the parameter. All of this needs to be written down somewhere, right? And needs to be managed in the end. And that's why I would highly recommend to come up with a new measurement plan for a Google Analytics 4 implementation. So you have thought through the implementation before you actually start creating these tags in here. So this is how you do it practically. But I would say, first of all, go through your Universal Analytics, go into your behavior reports here under events, and look up which events are currently being tracked, right? This is a demo account, so there's not much here, just the form submit that we have submitted. And what events do you have in here? And then you would put it all into a spreadsheet just like this one. And here we have like the UA events, and you would put in, for example, the event name, or the event itself is the form submit. Then when does this actually trigger? On the contact us form or on other forms, for example. The category right now is form submit. The action was the form ID, and then we had the label, which was page path. So you document all of your different events in here, and then you start going through the documentation and looking up, is this already tracked inside of the enhanced measurement events? Are there any recommended events that Google Analytics 4 wants us to use in order to interpret our data and not use too much space? And then if this is not the case, adhere to the naming convention here. So in our case, we went ahead and went with event name, and we said form submit. And the parameters that we entered here was the form ID. And here we put in our form ID. And if you have another parameter, then you would put this in. So for example, if you had a parameter, I don't know, what would be another parameter of a form? Maybe you have a different contact us form on a different page. So you would say page, no, not page location. We're already tracking this. So we are tracking page location, right? So this is automatically also being tracked. We don't have to put this in, location. And that was the page path, right? But if you had another parameter in here that we wanted to track, for example, if the user has clicked the checkbox, we might call this checkbox, and we might say true or false, right? So these are the things that you need to be paying attention to and looking after before you start implementing anything inside of Google Tag Manager. So I kind of went backwards here. This is what I would do. Some examples here. If you find, for example, form submit, we have a form submit, we will put this in this way. Maybe you have another form submit, but this form submit is a lead filled something out on a landing page. And this is actually also a form submit because there is no lead event inside of Google Analytics 4 that they would recommend. So we put in the form name, and it's called lead form, for example. Then we might have downloads in our old Universal Analytics. So we download a resource, right? A cheat sheet .pdf. Well, file downloads are automatically tracked by our enhanced measurements. So we don't really have to build in anything into our new implementation. Or the search functionality. We might have built this in previously, And this was maybe not on the page path. So search tracking can be quite, I would say, well, it can go one or the other way. Sometimes it's in the URL and Google Analytics can pick this up correctly automatically. It's under the enhanced measurement events in Google Analytics 4. So you might be able to use that functionality. But what if you have an Ajax search or a search that doesn't gives you partial results, or it's not really a form and it doesn't put it into the URL? Then it's a search form that you might want to track separately. Now, in that instance, I would actually say, then go ahead and look at the parameters that are automatically tracked and try to fill those, so the search term, with the search term that was actually put in, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel here and come up with some completely new parameters. So in this instance, you would go over and look at the enhanced measurement events and say, okay, I can't really use the site search that is built into Google Analytics 4, but what I can do is use the parameters, which, for example, are search term here. So this is how you can slowly build up your migration of Universal Analytics events to Google Analytics 4 events. And be sure, once you have implemented this all to Google Tag Manager, to test this all, just like we have done it in the debug mode. And then hopefully you'll be ready to take this implementation live, click the submit button, and then publish a version so everybody sees it on your site. All right. This has been it with a little bit of a demo here. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial of Measure School. If you want to find out more about Google Analytics, you can check out this video right over there. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video. My name is Julian. Till next time.